Ponce. Hey, Carlos, welcome to
Hey,
the show.
thank you,
And
Tulio.
we also have Mariel Navarro today, who's joining us from Chihuahua. Welcome back, Mariel. It's good to see you again.
Hi.
Great. And today our guest, let's not forget our guest, this is why we do this, right, is William Santana Lee, who is the CEO of Knightscope. Hey, William, welcome joining us from Silicon Valley in Mountain View, California.
Thanks
It's
for
great to
having
have
us.
you with us.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
We're very excited to speak with you. We see some awesome robotics and vehicles in the background. But before we get to that, let's get to know you a little bit. Let the audience meet you. If you could please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about Williams. Bill, tell us a little bit about Bill.
Sure. My name is William Santana Lee. I'm the chairman and CEO of Knightscope. By way of background, I'm an ex-Ford Motor Company executive. Spent 10 years there, 12 different jobs, 4 different continents, every functional area. Guess I'll date myself here. I worked on the 6.8 liter V10 engine. I worked on the Escort Tracer team with Mazda in Japan. Was the vehicle engineer for the Lincoln Mark 8. Worked for Ford of India. Was stationed in Ford of Europe for the never-ending turnarounds. Had a good amount of fun working for Ford of Brazil, setting up a new plant down there. My second to last job, I was a director of mergers and acquisitions when we were running around buying everything. And my last job, ill-advised, I was an entrepreneur. I convinced the board of directors of Ford Motor Company to release a $250 million to me to do a roll-up in the used parts industry. So I bought 22 companies in 11 months at about 600 employees, doing about 150 million in sales. And at the age of 28, I was the youngest senior executive at Ford worldwide out of, I think, about 430,000 employees at the time. So that gave me a little bit of the entrepreneurial bug. Fast forward to Knightscope. By the way, this is not a virtual thing. These are actually autonomous security robots behind me here at Knightscope headquarters in Silicon Valley, as you mentioned. Company's 7 years old. We have a slightly audacious goal to see if we can make the United States of America the safest country in the world. And the way to do that is to build new technologies and capabilities for law enforcement officers and security guards to be able to do their jobs much more effectively. Just a really quick kind of math thing to think about. There are 1 million security guards in the US. There's 1 million law enforcement professionals, so that's 2 million people. You can't triple shift a human, so you have to run 24/7. So at any given point in time, there's only 500,000 people trying to secure 328 million Americans across 50 states. And that is why we have this ongoing violence and crime and terrorist activity, is we never built the appropriate tools for these folks to be able to do their jobs. And that's what we've been working really hard on for the last 7 years to bring what was supposed to be the impossible to reality. And glad to be here and happy to discuss a little bit about the technology, about startups, and whatever else you'd like to cover.
Well, Bill, it's great. Thanks for sharing those data points. I don't know that a lot of people are aware of that. Not to get political or anything, but maybe we ought to rethink this whole idea of defunding the police when there's not enough of them, right? So let's see if we can solve that problem in another way, right? If we have some better, smarter ways to secure the nation, as you mentioned. Let's get right into the topic today. Carlos, do you mind introducing the topic? I'm looking forward to digging in and seeing what we discover.
Not at all, Tulio. Not first of all, thanks, Bill, our guest, for being here with us today. And well, he was telling us that because of analysts report that it will likely be another 10 more years before fully autonomous self-driving vehicles are viable. So do we really have to wait? So that's why we're here to talk about. So the topic is creatively commercializing self-driving technology. What are the near-term possibilities for this? So that's the topic that our guest is going to be covering today. So, Bill, tell us and the audience, why did you choose this particular topic? Why did you think it was relevant for today's day and age? Let's start with that. Thank you.
I think if you would just step back, if I told you that $80 billion went into a sector, there are 200 companies working on self-driving autonomous technology, and literally no one has shipped anything, there's probably a problem. I think Knightscope's the only company in the world operating 24/7, 365, fully autonomous, no human intervention across an entire country. We operate across 5 time zones with real clients in the real world, in real world circumstances. And I think that's very unique. So how did $80 billion go into a sector and nothing come out? Well, it's kind of hard. I said back in 2013, it's going to take a long time to commercialize this technology. And maybe for the engineers in the audience will relate to this. Engineers are really good at solving problems with constrained boundary conditions. Like, here's the kind of box and some constraints. Continue to iterate, and Mr. and Mrs. Engineer, please get this thing to work. And that's kind of more in line with what new innovation and projects might deal with. In this particular case, what folks are trying to do is put a 4,000-pound unmanned vehicle on a public road with no regulatory requirements, no safety requirements, no insurance framework, no legal framework, at a random time of day, random environment, random vehicles, random pedestrians, random climate, random everything. You basically have no constraints. Another way to put it is everyone's trying to go to Pluto first and didn't bother to stop over at the moon. And that's just not, I'm in the minority here. Most people disagree with what I'm asserting, is that you really need a crawl, walk, run approach. Like, wouldn't it be a little bit smarter and less use of reckless capital to go maybe 1 to 3 miles an hour? Let's see if we can get those to work consistently, 24/7, in the rain, at night, with people, cats, dogs, and sheep, and I don't know what else we've seen. And then crawl our way up to 3 to 10 miles an hour, etc. And that would probably be a more rational way to commercialize a set of technologies that are extremely, extremely difficult. And here we sit in 2020. Did you arrive at your destination or come back and forth from shopping or whatever in a self-driving car today? No one did. And that's kind of the point. And it's going to take a lot more processing power. It's going to take a lot more energy. It's going to take a lot more experience. So when I was in Detroit, if we had a question on noise, vibration, and harshness, or sun load, or heat soaking a vehicle, or durability, or airbags, or whatever, we'd have 10, 20, 30, 100 years worth of data on emissions on whatever subject you want to cover. Where is the playbook? Where are the specifications? And where are you going to test all the self-driving technology? It hasn't been done before. And so it's going to take a lot of time. Don't get me wrong. I want everyone to succeed. I want us to get to that point. It's going to be a massive, huge change for a $2 trillion industry. But this is not the way to commercialize it. And what we're going to enter now is a self-driving winter. People start realizing, especially all the venture capitalists up and down Sand Hill Road here, there's no real mergers and acquisition opportunities here because the major automakers are struggling with their base business. There's no way to commercialize this stuff just yet because there's no regulatory, legal, and insurance framework. Maybe we should cut our losses. And that's gonna have a negative impact on the innovation cycle. It'll eventually get solved. I'm just not in agreement that it's going to happen in the next few years. You're going to see little pilots here and there, but at scale, I don't know, you're 2030, 2035, somewhere in there.
It's interesting. I mean, we've seen this sort of behavior in the past, right? If you go back 20 years when the internet started launching, everybody put money at it and everybody went at it in a certain way, selling the dream, and very few actually delivered real value. And then you had a big burst, right? And eventually it caught its legs and value came out of it, right? Yep. So what I'm hearing is, most companies are selling the dream and investors are buying the dream, but they're not being pragmatic in terms of actually delivering useful value right now. And it's often, let's blame the regulatory bodies with too many limitations, which is why we can't get there, versus, like you said, maybe, have a vehicle that does 1 to 3 miles an hour pretty consistently, test that out, perfect that. So let's talk about that a little bit. What is Knightscope doing? I know you're heavy in the security space, as you in your introduction. Tell us a little bit sort of what you have in place right now and how's it working? What is the application and use case that you're using right now with autonomous vehicles?
So our strategy is twofold. One less obvious but simple, and the other one a little bit more complicated. The obvious and simple one is if I put a marked law enforcement vehicle in front of your home or your office, criminal behavior changes. Most of these criminals aren't all that bright, and they're looking for the path of least resistance to just get away with something, and almost a crime of passion. So if you pull up, let's say you're driving on the highway and you see a patrol vehicle on the side of the road, you don't even think. Your foot automatically goes to that brake pedal. And it's kind of the same reality that we're seeing out in the field, where let's say you pull up into a hospital parking lot at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you see a 5 foot tall, 400-pound machine roaming around on its own. There's no one remote controlling it. It says security on the side of it. The strobe light's going. You don't know what it actually does. Like, you're going to steal the car down the street, and you're not going to steal the car there. And that's literally what's been happening with our clients, who are 10 of the Fortune 1000 are clients of ours, several law enforcement agencies. We just landed our first federal government contract, multiple hospitals, manufacturing plants, retail, mall, basically anywhere indoors or outdoors you might see a security guard and officer is fair game. And how these operate is they run literally 24/7 on their own across the country, using an analogous self-driving technology, where we use lasers, sonar, wheel encoders, inertial measurement unit, and a bunch of crazy software for these things to roam around on their own in dynamic environments, either in a parking lot or inside of a mall. And then the next thing, the more complicated bit, is how can we get these machines to see, feel, hear, and smell, and do 100 times more than a human could ever possibly do over the long term. So the machines have a bunch of sensors on them. They spit out over 90 terabytes of data a year that no human's ever going to be able to process. So we have the machines put this in a digestible format for a human to utilize. So those alerts then go to the security guard or to the officer or 911 dispatcher or what have you. And that could be running a thermal scan of an area. It could be reading 1,200 license plates a minute. It could be facial rec. It could be just detecting a person in an environment they're not supposed to be. And a few other things that allow the guards and officers, as we like to say, have unprecedented situational awareness. So again, to couple those two things together, a physical deterrence, and then grab as much data from the environment as possible.
So when you say physical, I'm sorry, Tulio.
No, yeah.
I just became intrigued about something. One aspect of this technology, without getting into the actual high-end technology like sensors and beams and sonars, that those elements. What I hear is that there's some kind of visual or sensor. How can I say it? So I'm trying to find the right words. There's a visual reaction to these equipment, these technologies, in which let's say that there could be a potential theft in process, and then the thief might be deterred from performing his action just because of seeing the device alone. So there's some kind of
and hearing. We actually psychologically have the machines play a unique patrol sound. Mm-hmm. So you're not sneaking up on someone. And when you arrive there, you know, if it's at night, the strobe light's going that you can see like a mile away, and you've got a patrol sound. So all your senses are like, I don't know what this is. Obviously that thing has cameras at least. So someone's watching what I'm doing. I think I better kind of behave.
And probably recording, I would assume, in a security environment. So, I mean, you're talking about augmenting the capacity and extending the capacity that it would normally be impossible, right? You could have a guard that essentially now has 5 or 6 of these deployed or even more, and his or her job becomes just monitoring all these screens and input and making decisions on them, and being basically at 5, 6 places at the same time, which you literally can't do physically can't do as a human being, right?
Yeah, I'd modify that with a little bit of additional data. One of the big challenges for the guarding industry, it's 100 to 400% employee turnover rates. That's worse than the retail fast food industry. They can't
Wow.
keep the people in the job. So now imagine you show up at the job and like you got promoted. There are 7 machines that now report to you. You have the tools at your fingertips to be able to do your job that much more effectively, more than any of your colleagues could ever possibly do. Are you going to stay in that job a little bit longer and maybe get paid appropriately? Possibly. I think a majority of our clients are certainly adding this as augmentation, as you mentioned earlier. But there are a minority of clients where either one of two things is going on. Either it's not a job yet. So one of our clients is kind of a weird circumstance. It's an empty building. So the client basically said, the insurance company told me I have to have security. I don't want to pay $28 an hour to a security guard to stare at an empty building. There's no patrons, there's no tenants, there's no employees. So they hired us. Now, was that a job in the first place? Not so sure. Another case, it's just budget. Literally, people are getting, if you're spending $150 million a year on security guards, you're gonna probably be looking for cost reductions. And then the last one is more tied to 2020 during the pandemic here. Not to be funny about it, but robots are immune. I mean, very simply, do you want to be the security guard at the hospital right now? Probably not, right? So that becomes, now people start realizing the remote monitoring will likely become the norm.
Speaking of remote monitoring, you mentioned something about the robots eventually being able to smell, have sensors where they can smell. So can you redefine security to go beyond just the physical security against a potential theft to actually include, speaking of the pandemic, let's say there's a robot that can sense if an area has been infected, right? Could it be programmed where it could actually sanitize an area and help maybe avoid some of these things from spreading? Is there an application for that? Maybe in the future where these robotic self-driving vehicles can actually not only just monitor for potential threats from people, but also could scan an area to see if it's infected or something, or there's a pathogen or something that it could sanitize. Any application for that possibly?
You're right on the gray area for me. So 95% of startups fail. 80% never make it past their 3rd anniversary. And one of the reasons is the CEO is not willing to say no. And this is how people get in trouble. Our mission, I stated earlier, is to make the United States the safest country in the world, focused on physical security, crime, terrorism, etc. Is it off mission to be scanning a hospital room for COVID? Probably. Is the company a robotics company or an advanced physical security company? I'm trying to solve the country's problem. And we need to stay focused on the actual mission. There are companies that actually do robots for exactly what you mentioned. You're on the fine line there because the smell could be, pathogens, or we happen to be there anyway, and we can do some additional things for our clients. No different than a security guard. If you think about it, most of the time the guard is actually acting almost like a concierge. Directions, where's the restroom, that kind of stuff. So there are some things at a limit that we're willing to do that are over and above. But to say that it's a robotics company and there are other applications like in agriculture or in hospitals or something that we're off mission. Keep in mind the market opportunity here. $500 billion gets spent in the public and private sector globally on security. I think we've got $500 billion a year to contend with. And I think we've got our plate more than full.
Well, I love the focus, and like anything, the minute you succeed at proving a use case, it opens up other use cases and it expands the opportunity in that space. Again, I'm starting to see the idea of walk, crawl before you run, and maybe some of these other companies that are investing all this money trying to come up with autonomous driving cars for people should refocus their attention on other things. Let's talk a little bit about what it's been like building this business. You've been at it for, I think you said 7 years, and you're pushing the envelope on bleeding edge technology, right? What has it been like facing obstacles or people who aren't very open to adopting new approaches like this. How have you overcome that? Are you making progress? What's been the biggest hurdle for you to get this to where you are now?
Obstacles. What obstacles? It's a startup. Everything runs smoothly, like clockwork. One day I'll write a book. We've been to hell and back almost on a daily basis. When we started the company, I was told the following: "Hey, Bill, you're out of your mind. This will never work. It's hardware and software. It's too complicated. You should pick one. And oh, by the way, physical security is not an investment thesis. You need to go away." And I think one thing that would certainly be helpful for your audience to better understand is the backdrop of the structural problem in the U.S. I love my country, but in one regard, it is massively flawed. In most countries outside the U.S., the military and law enforcement, crudely speaking, is at the national level. In the U.S., the U.S. Department of Defense has a $700 billion budget, and there's one person in charge, the Secretary of Defense, that gives all the troops every level of capability you might imagine. There's over 2 million troops. If you want a new submarine, you want a new jet fighter, you want a new tank, whatever it is, we give them an unbelievable arsenal of capabilities, left, right, and upside down. And if it doesn't exist, there's risk capital, there's a process, there's decision making, and the widget will come out the other side. What most people don't understand, and I've been saying for the last 7 years, the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security have no federal jurisdiction over 19,000 law enforcement agencies and 8,000 private security firms. There's literally no one in charge. There's no risk capital. There's no innovation process. There's no Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Raytheon, Boeing to build you whatever you want. And that's why in the year 2020, you have security guards sitting out in the parking lot with a number 2 pencil and a notepad. And then we wonder why crime has $1 trillion negative economic impact on the U.S. every single year. The level of technology that we provide as a country to our first responders is beneath the dignity of this nation. And it's high time we actually do something about it. And that's what we've been working very hard on, and have the honor and privilege of getting up every morning here in Silicon Valley and not sitting here and arguing and debating the problem or what have you, is actually putting the blood, sweat, and tears into actually fixing it. And it's been more than a challenge. Fast forward 7 years, we've now operated over 1 million hours out in the field. We have clients across 5 time zones. We've helped the law enforcement agency issue an arrest warrant for a sexual predator. We help another law enforcement agency capture a domestic abuser. We helped another law enforcement agency apprehend an armed gunman. We helped a security guard apprehend a thief. We stopped a fraudulent insurance claim, and we're just getting started. So I think the opportunity is significant, but we have to run this almost like a political campaign. We're going to have to change the country's understanding and belief of how we fix things. And one of the ways we're going to do it is by our investor base. I've raised over $70 million to build all this technology from scratch. We are backed by 16,000 investors and 4 major corporations. And those 16,000 people are well-placed folks that are chief security officers in major corporations, FBI, NYPD detectives, CIA, DHS, lawyers, bankers, HR folks, all kinds of people that want to help fix the problem. And this is going to be a multi-decade effort, but we finally at the point that we can start scaling up our operations. But it's been less than smooth sailing, let's put it that way.
I bet. Mariel, I think you had some questions.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Nah, this is going to be an easy one. No, it's going to be easy. Going back to the capabilities of autonomous security robots, you said before you talked about a thermal scan. Yeah. Is it possible to use that for preventing another incident, such as, I don't know, maybe a fire at a hospital?
Yep. So majority of our machines have a thermal scan capability. They can do a few things. One is most of them are set to 400 degrees, just to make sure that if we detect something that's over that temperature threshold, the guard gets either an email, text, or phone call, or a message on our application, on our user interface. In some cases, it's, I'll just give you a live example. It happened at a mall, pre-COVID, obviously. The machine was roaming around and detected an abnormal amount of heat out of one of the kiosks. And this is going to sound funny, but someone left the curling iron literally plugged in. And there's no way the guard or anyone would have picked that up. And the mall operator calls us up and says, not only did you help us detect that, but if we hadn't, you probably would have burned down half the mall. That also happened at a commercial property client in San Francisco, where we started seeing, or the client started seeing, using our technology, that a certain pipe started getting too hot every week. And we saved them a couple $1 million of some pretty bad destruction that would have happened. And then there's future applications for thermal scanning that we're looking at. But yes, basically, how can you use technology to see, feel, hear, and smell, and understand the environment a lot more, and do it consistently than a human could ever do. It's how can we give guards superhuman capabilities at their fingertips?
That's amazing.
Yes. Actually pretty cool, not just taking care of people. Preventing a robbery or something. It's also about taking care of ourselves, of the self-harm that we could do to ourselves. With all these features that a autonomous security robot might have, do you think, or what would you say are the main obstacles that you find in commercializing self-driving technology? Maybe the cost, or maybe people not trusting this kind of devices?
To clarify, are you asking challenges on the autonomous technology portion itself, or are you asking about commercializing the security robots?
Well, commercializing the security robots. People might see it as a device with so many features that it'll be so expensive.
Let me address two items there. One is the price that you just mentioned. It might be too expensive. So in the US, an off-duty law enforcement officer armed with a weapon is around $85 an hour, plus or minus. A security guard, depending on what you want him or her to do, is $15 to $35 an hour. And that's not what the guard gets paid. That's what the client pays. We offer our technology on a machine as a service business model at an effective price of $4 to $11 an hour. So there goes the price, any concern over price, because that becomes very attractive for a client. Obstacles, I think it's probably twofold. One is disbelief, and that can come in two different forms. One is most folks see what we're doing. They go on our website, they do a webcast like this. Some people think these is like a virtual thing, and they don't realize that this is actual. And they think they're prototypes. Well, honestly, we're in business operating across the country, and this is complete disbelief. That doesn't exist. Obviously, when are you going to commercialize this? When are you going to ship something? And I'm like, we have paying clients. We have millions of dollars of revenue coming in, and it doesn't connect. People don't realize. And part of it's Hollywood, over the last 30 years have done us a service and a disservice. People think robots can do up this, and what they can do is down here somewhere, and they don't realize that now it's starting to kind of happen. And then second is just resources. To be honest, so have a tiny sales team, so we're going to be, we're scaling up now, and just now that we've got the point where at kind of rinse and repeat, we need a lot more resources. We're 40 employees trying to do work of several hundred, and obviously that doesn't work. Most people, the other thing, don't realize, including when they visit here, hey, so who designed all this stuff? We did. So who did you contract to engineer everything? No, all the mechanical, electrical, firmware, software we built from scratch ourselves. Where in China did you get these built? And I just want to lose my mind. And I have to walk them through the door here and show them our team building these robots ourselves. So yes, made in the USA.
Well, Bill,
So
this
right
is
now,
exciting. We're up on time. It's always fun when it's always the time's always up when we get really into. You know what I admire? Admire that you've taken this on. And one thing, while there is definitely a disconnect between the federal, state, and local level in this country when it comes to security, there's also this amazing opportunity in a country like ours where the private sector can solve a public problem. And you're a living example of the private sector partnering with local state agencies to solve a problem that needs to be solved in our society. So we wish you a lot of success with that. We want to stay in touch with you for sure. These are wonderful use cases, and I feel more secure knowing that this technology is coming, hopefully sooner than later at the state and local levels, because we need it. We need more help, more hands-on security, and I love your mission. So thank you for joining us.
If you know somebody that needs a security robot, just send them to Knightscope.com and they can get a private virtual demo of all the capabilities.
I was thinking I might get one just to catch whatever neighbor doesn't clean up after their dogs in front of my yard and grab them by the ear.
One to keep an eye on
grab them by the ear and say, "I got you," you know.
Yeah, so, I don't know if you're aware of this. Tulio Mariel might remember this, but we had a robot at the office. Do you remember that, Mariel?
Yeah, we still do that beam.
I think we still do, right?
Not really. It was at the
I have the app. Sometimes I would just use the app to say hello to people. I'd walk around with the robot, just surprise people. I'm like, "What are you doing here?" It was pretty cool. But yeah, that's like very, very basic stuff. Carlos, what do we got coming up? We got one more show tomorrow, right?
Yeah, that's tomorrow, Tulio, and we're going to be speaking about eye tracking and image processing for home treatment of the lazy eye. And this is going to be with Rand Yam, the CEO of Novasight from Israel. And the topic is going to be, listen to this, using Netflix and Disney to cure vision disorders. So I look forward to that one. I mean, it doesn't get any more interesting than that. So that's what we have for tomorrow, Tulio, right here on Dojo Live at 1 p.m. Pacific.
Stay with us as we wrap up, Bill. Thanks for joining us, everyone. See you again tomorrow. Stay safe.
Out there.
Bye.